All right, welcome back to today. Today we are going to be covering Chapter 5, which is called Forms of Ownership. Yesterday we spoke about the interest that you would gain or the degree of ownership. Today we're going to talk about the forms of ownership in which you take title. There are basically three basic ways to take ownership: single, some form of group, or in a trust. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is the forms of ownership and the way the property is held. We're going to define the distinction between owning property by itself and owning property as a co-ownership. And there are several different types of co-ownerships we're going to go over. We'll also talk a little bit about legal entities like trusts, companies, corporations, partnerships, and those kind of issues. All right? So, forms of ownership. There are three ways that a person takes ownership or takes the form of ownership. The easiest and most common one is when a person takes ownership as a single entity, one person. All right? And for today's confusing word of the day, when you take ownership as one person, it's severalty. All right? Sounds like the word several, which means many, but what it comes from is the base word is sever. You are severing yourself from the rest of the public by becoming the sole owner of a piece of property. So ownership in severalty. Everybody say it so you can get your practice word in, because they always severalty. That's the way to say it. It's owned in severalty means one person, even though it sounds like several, but it's not. That would be way too simple. All right? The second way is some form of co-ownership. Co-ownership is when more than one person own the property. That's pretty straightforward. What do we got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I can't count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Everybody here? If you're not here, raise your hand. All right, you guys move around a lot and it starts messing with me. There are two major forms of co-ownership. The first one is called a tenant in common. You will hear the slang word, it's called a TIC. Tenants in common. T-I-C, a TIC. I want you to think of a TIC as a pie. All right? It's easy to look at it as a section or a pie, because what you could have are different sizes of pie. You can have different shapes. You can lift a piece of pie out, put another piece of pie in without disturbing the entire pie. So tenants in common are allowed to have different ownership amounts. They don't have to talk to each other. They don't have to ask each other permission when they sell. None of that, okay? So let's look at it. So as an example, you could say one of them owns 24%. Now, if he owns 24% of a TIC, it is what's called an undividable interest. An undividable interest. He may own 24%, but he does not own 24 out of the chairs. He can't pick his 24 chairs up and won't go home. It's an undividable interest, meaning he owns 24% of every chair. All right? You can't divide it out. Someone owns 16%, they own 16% of the desk, the chairs, the parking lot, the roof, the dumpster. You can't say, well, I'm taking my 16 chairs and going home because that's my 16%. No, it's not. You own 16% of all 100 chairs. And I own 24% of those 100 chairs. So they're an undividable interest. It's undividable. Now, you are also allowed to have disproportional shares. I own 12, Singh owns 28, Min owns 14. We don't have to have equal shares. They're disproportional. You can, I mean, we can own 50-50, but there's no law. I can own 1%, 18%, 34%, and then whatever adds up to 100. So they are a disproportional, undivided interest in the building. Ticks are very common in very high-end Class A office buildings or medical buildings where it may be $80 million and I don't have $80 million, 2.4. So I'm going to call you Maggie, and she's like, well, I got 800,000. Okay, well, Singh's got another 3, and then we base our ownership on how much we put in, and we all own this building as tenants in common. The only thing that we share is what? What's the only thing we have in common? Okay, here's a hint. It's called tenants in common. What's the only thing we share in common? We're tenants of the building. So it's called the only unity that we have is possession. The only unity or the only thing we share between the three of us is that we are allowed to be in the building. We have disproportional ownership interests. We have disproportional amounts. We got them at separate times. Singh's been in the building for 3 years. Maggie just bought her share yesterday. We all have our own title work that says Singh is 24% owner of the building located at 12 Smith Street. Maggie is 18% owner of the building at 12 Smith Street. Raymond is 36% owner of 12 Smith Street. The only thing we share in common is we are allowed to be in the building. Hence the word tenants in common. Okay? One of the other major portions, and I just said it a second ago, was the reason I want you to look at it like a pie is because, let's say Maggie here decides she wants to sell her share and come in, and somebody else can come in. She doesn't even need to talk to us. It works just like regular, finger quotes for those of you at home, regular real estate. She can sell it, she can rent it, she can give it away. It goes in her will when she dies, and she does not even need our permission to do it. That's the biggest key to the difference in what's coming up. All right? That's why I say a pie. You can lift a wedge of pumpkin pie out without disturbing the rest and a wedge of apple pie in, still 100%, but no need to talk to us about it. All right? The benefits is, once again, bigger buildings. I can't afford 80 million, but I got 2 million, so I'll go get 40 other guys. We'll have a really nice building. We're going to create a tenant in common. I now own a fractional share, and I can sell it whenever I want. I want to get out of the business. I'm going to sell my business. On the second floor is your dental shop. On the first floor is my chiropractic, but we own the building together.
Everybody shares in the property tax.
Yeah. All right? So the second one is called a joint tenant. Joint tenant. I want you to think of joint tenants like, I'm going to change, like a glass of water. Now, this is not my Freedom cup of water from yesterday. This is a new glass. Or a glass of bourbon. That might be better. All right? Joint tenants have 4 unities. Here on Tenants in common, we only had one thing that was in common. We all had possession of the property. In the joint tenants, we have four things in common. One of them is possession. As joint tenants, we are all allowed to be in the property. It's a possession. If there's, let's go back to the Maggie, Singh, and I. There's three of us. We must have equal shares. So how much does Singh own? 33 1/3%. It cannot be anything different. We all have to own the exact same amount. So there's three of us. We all own the same amount. Now, it's still an undividable interest, meaning Singh owns 33.3333% of everything in the building. He can't take his 33 chairs and go home. No, he owns a third of every chair. I own a third of every chair. Maggie owns a third of every chair. So we share another unity called the interest. We have to have the same amount of interest. No more disproportional shares allowed. All right? The third one is we have to get it at the same time. We bought this property all together at the same time, or through an operation of law, like a reading of a will, and someone left it to us. No more selling out. And the fourth one is, we are all on one title work. It would say Singh and Maggie and Raymond as joint tenants to the property located at 12 Smith Street. One piece of paper with all three of our names. So we got same title work. We have four unities that are required. Possession, interest, time, and title. Spells out PIT. You will find this book loves to do this kind of anagram so you can remember stuff. Are we good so far? All right, I want to change the audio file.